About 2 months ago, I met Nick Atkinson. And Nick, when I called you on the phone from Dunkin' Donuts about 3 weeks ago and said I discovered another Australian, what was that like for you?
No, it's great. I was actually really excited because we have a great camaraderie, us Aussies. And then I met Connor today, and Connor's also from Perth, which is, as we mentioned, one of the most fabulous places in the world. So we have that double connection. We're both Aussies and we're both from Perth. So there we have it.
When I sat down with you at Dunkin' Donuts and said a few weeks before I had met with Nick Atkinson, you had never met another entertainer, singer from Australia. So how excited were you to connect with Nick?
Look, really exciting. It's something that it's really rare here in New York, and it's so nice to hear the accent and that same kind of way of being. So it's exciting to know that I'm not a lone ranger out here, that's for sure.
I want to get the raw emotion. Nick, what was it like for you the day you learned that we lost Heath Ledger?
Wow, that's a tough call. Yeah, Heath was a big inspiration to me. Like he was like I mentioned to you when we had lunch that day. He was the most famous actor ever to come out of Perth. I was getting ready to go to work. It flashed across the bottom of the TV in one of those sort of horrible news flashes, so I couldn't really believe it. And he was such an incredible spirit and such a brilliant talent. And I kind of feel an obligation now, and probably Connor does too. It's like as a performer, actor, another Perth boy, I'd kind of like to continue in the spirit of what Heath was doing, because he was kind of a one of a kind.
And you were in New York when this happened?
I was living here when this happened. He was destined for great things. He'd done some beautiful work, and he was destined to do a whole lot more, you know.
Connor, where were you, and how did the tragic news affect you that very day?
I was actually, I just got home from school. I was still in high school at the time. And I remember getting home and seeing it on the news. And it was about 9 o'clock at night, in the morning, they found it. And I stayed up all night that night. I think it was a Thursday evening. I stayed up all night and just watched it and watched the news. I found it really hard to turn it off. Because he's from Perth and I was in Perth at the time. I remember when they did his memorial where they spread his ashes at the most famous beach, Cottesloe Beach. And they all swam out to the water and in a circle and sat out there for Heath. And it was an incredible sense of community when that happened, just because Perth is so tight-knit, and it really hit everyone. I think it was something that you watch his performance, and Heath was all about the work. He wasn't about the press, he wasn't about the celebrity, he just wanted to do the work. And when he did the Joker, watching that role for me still is a role that I can't fathom how he did it, and incredibly inspiring.
What was it like in Perth? It must have been such profound sadness that engulfed the whole area. It must have been unbelievably sad.
It was. I mean, there's not often international news gets posted at a school assembly, but I remember we have our assemblies Friday morning in my old high school, and it was the first, everyone got called in earlier, and we all sat there, and there were pictures, and there were all these things, because my school was one of actually the rival schools to where Heath went. He went to a private school as well, and we play that school every month, and it was a real sense of, this is someone from here who's just followed what he wants to do the whole way across the world, and it was such a shame.
Yeah, it's Nick, in my opinion, and I'll let you expand on it, that my feeling, if it wasn't for this tragedy, because of his epic, unbelievable performance as the Joker, he'd be one of the biggest stars in Hollywood right now. He was on the way to soaring to the top.
Absolutely, there's no doubt in my mind that that role was absolutely incredible. The stuff that he was doing with that role, and unfortunately, I think that had a lot to do with how his life ended. But I just think it was such a great loss. He was so brilliantly talented. And what we were saying earlier in the interview, he really captured that spirit of like authenticity. He had a groundedness. There's something magical and otherworldly about him as well. That it's a great loss. I find it hard to go back and watch those Batman movies now because yes, he's brilliant, but it's just really sad to see him gone.
It kind of reminds me of I was 6 years old at the time, and I was walking back from elementary school, and everyone in Wavin Square was crying hysterically when President Kennedy got shot and killed, and those traumatic days stay with you forever.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree. And that was the thing. I think there's always a shock when these things happen to us. It's like, you know, for Heath was such this beautiful sort of like guiding light for us actors from Perth, because he was from Guildford.
Yeah, Guildford.
I met him briefly when he was a young kid. He was probably only about like 9 or 10, and I was probably one of my last years of high school. And he was on the bus. He was a shy little kid. I came across him again when he was doing Sweat, the TV series, and he was a very brave actor because his character was gay in this TV series, which was very, especially for that era, it was a very brave. I thought, this is a really brave little actor, because a lot of young guys his age would turn down a role like that at this time in history. And he just had this beautiful energy to him, and I thought, well, if Heath can do it, I can do it, you know?
Great, guys. And I know that deep inside your careers, somehow, some way, Connor and Nick, I'll get to you on this, that when you perform, you're continuing his legacy, because he'll always be part of you.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, when you hear about he locked himself in a hotel room for 6 weeks to prepare for that role, I think there's no actor that can say that they're doing enough. I think there's always, you know, a further place to go and more commitment to give, and, you know, whenever I find myself tired in a rehearsal or, you know, in the book work and research, I always think there's no limit to how much we can invest ourselves, and Heath absolutely proved that, and how much he invested in every single role, whether it was a comedy, whether it was being the Joker. He really invested himself, and that is something that I carry with me every single show or film or whatever I do.
So he might be gone, Nick, but that legacy, and I know that stays with you almost every day.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful, and that's the things we keep going back to the Joker. Well, but he has this beautiful energy to him. What was the one, like the King? He was a King Arthur. Was it some series like that he did? Anyway, he had this beautiful spirit that he brought to everything he did. And I think the thing you have to watch as an actor, you want to bring all that your heart and your fragility and your truth to a role, but be careful that doesn't crush the industry, and the work doesn't crush your spirit at the same time.
Absolutely. Nick and Connor, thank you for sharing. And folks, on November 12th, come down to Long Beach. They're going to be performing before the Sharks play on November 12th, and you will be treated to 2 amazing talents on November 12th in Long Beach at the Sharks game.